What's the best way to manage your team and give them feedback? Well, we're going to talk about it on today's podcast episode, including why annual reviews are, frankly, a big pile of junk. Now, I talk to a lot of business owners and leaders, and I a lot of times get the response, well, I thought I was supposed to do annual reviews. I thought that was like the one thing I should be doing. Not exactly. It's actually not super great for actually managing people and giving them candid feedback and useful feedback. We're going to talk about it on the show today. Hey, my name's Blake Benz. I'm the host of the Good Advice Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning into the show today. You've moseyed on to a pretty good podcast that covers the actionable, practical things that you need to know to run a sustainable brand. And today we got an oldie but a goodie on the show, re-airing an ep back from 2018, I think, about annual reviews. It's something I still feel very passionately about that we're going to share today. And before we dive in, here's a word from one of the amazing businesses we like to talk about on the podcast. Check this out, and we'll be back soon. If you're working hard on your business, by now you've learned that what your business needs is not more hours from you. That's right. You don't need to turn your work week from a 60-hour week into an 80-hour week just to try to get ahead. In fact, what you need is to work less hours. It's about knowing when to get away and take a much-needed vacation. That's why I love what Paul's doing with Wishlist Travel. He knows all the best locations and all the things you need to know to make your vacation the best experience possible. All you got to do is reach out to Paul at wishlisttravel.biz. And most of all, Paul knows how to turn a vacation into an experience, which is what we want to pay for anyway. You can take a vacation anywhere, but how often do you really, truly get to have an experience that helps you get that important time you need to get back to your business and give it the attention it deserves? So reach out to Paul today at wishlisttravel.biz. Or go to his website, wishlisttravel.biz, that's .biz.
Today, what I want to talk about is what do you do when you have a really challenging employee? And I run into this every now and then with different business owners, but especially business owners who they're thinking, really the way they frame it is, how do I hold my employees accountable? You know, what are the ways that I can get them to perform better than they're doing previously? And my answer has always been the same. In fact, let me take you back to, there was a company I was working with maybe about 18 months ago. And I was noticing this trend of, and it wasn't just boss to employee, it was actually more between employees. It was like tension between employees, and it was, oh, this employee doesn't like working with that employee, or if they do, there's drama there, or there's, it's ooh, I don't know about that. In fact, it actually reminds me of a company that I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where this guy was saying that him and this coworker, they don't even talk anymore because they just can't get along in the office. And I was like, geez, well, how many employees do you have? And he was like, we have 5 employees. And I was like, wow. Out of 5 employees, 2 of them aren't even talking to each other. Like, what? That doesn't work. That's not a business that's going to grow and scale. Well, going back to this company I worked with about 18 months ago, it was a similar deal. Now, no one had gotten to the point where, they just weren't talking anymore. But it was a sort of tense environment, this sort of high stress environment. And maybe that's even unfair to say that. It's more of like, we just know there's issues in working with this person or between these 2 people. Now, as you can guess, this makes your business very slow. And I've talked in the past about how for your business to actually grow, you don't need a 5-year plan. You need like a 12-month plan. In fact, you need like a 3-month and a 6-month plan, because business today, it's innovating so quickly that if you are not matching that pace, you're going to get left behind. One of the biggest things that slows down businesses is the office drama, the office conflict, and not even between, 2 employees, even like the boss who knows I have an employee who just doesn't do a good job. And rather than deal with that, what I often see are bosses who they wait entirely too long to see that behavior change. So let's categorize all of this into How do you get people to perform better at their jobs? How do you let someone know that they're not, pulling their weight, that they're not making it happen? There's a very simple answer. You talk to them. And already that sounds like kind of like a duh. Like, yeah, I know I talked to him, but here's all I know. And maybe if you're listening, you're like, yeah, I do that all the time. Maybe you're a rarity. But what I have seen for the most part is that in 90% of businesses, when someone is underperforming, people will talk about that person to everyone else but that person. Here's the best example of this. You ever heard of something called annual reviews? I think annual reviews are the biggest waste of time for a business, because here's why. The fact that you would actually wait 1 year. I mean, let's say your annual review is in January, and then February 1st, an employee starts, maybe they develop a new behavior or a new habit that is counterintuitive to the business, or they show something, maybe a flash of immaturity that you're thinking, okay, I don't like that. What happens in big business is someone in HR, or either that or a complaint will go to HR, but someone in HR will make a note of it. They'll put it in the file, and that file it's lost forever until the next January, where the manager brings it out and they say, hey, let's talk about this last year for you. And it kind of feels like calling on past debts. And maybe you've even been in that situation where, you're sitting in this annual review and you're kind of wondering, like, what are they going to mention? And I've even been in that situation where someone mentioned something I did. Actually, I had two things mentioned. One of them, I tried and could not remember what my boss was talking about. And they had written out a paragraph of this sort of the circumstances. And I said, man, I'm really sorry that I missed the mark there, but I just don't even remember that. And the second thing is, yeah, I do remember that, but that's so insignificant. It's like you're pulling out a rap sheet on me. It's like it's kind of awkward that you're mentioning these things now, right? And it kind of makes me laugh too, because you have owners and bosses and managers who, it's like, I can't just give them a glowing review. I have to give them something to work on for the next year. And it just feels very fabricated. It feels very forced. And so if you're doing 1 year reviews, here's what you need to challenge yourself to do. I want to challenge you either every week or every other week to sit down with your employees and tell them how good or not good of a job they're doing. And here's actually what this can lead to. Now, there's a few reasons why people don't do this. First of all, it's very awkward to tell somebody when they suck or when they're missing the mark. It's very awkward because sometimes it feels like you are micromanaging someone, or you are, coming against them, or really, laying it on heavy on them. And so what happens is you have owners who they delay the conversation, or maybe even worse, they never have the conversation, but they vent about it to other people. And now everyone in the office knows the deal of that person, but no one's ever talked to that person about it. Right? And here's what's so funny about this is I mentioned the company I was talking to where this was kind of going on. And so I said, you know what? I have 2 hours with this team. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about candidness and telling people exactly what they need to hear. Now, you can frame it with tactfulness. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be a weirdo. You don't have to be creepy about it. But we're going to talk about what does it look like to be very direct and intentional with people who are missing the mark. And I have to be honest, I was actually pretty disappointed after this 2 hour meeting was said and done. The reason I was disappointed was because I saw this as a problem, but as I was talking about it to the team, they were like, yeah, duh, totally. Oh yeah, this is easy. Sure. And I was kind of like, wow, like on one hand, I'm glad they're agreeing rather than disagreeing, but maybe I've missed the mark. It sounds like they're pretty good at this. Well, the very next day I had a coaching with one of those people on the team. So we're getting coffee, and or maybe it was the day after, and she says, "Hey, I'm having a problem with so and so, and yada yada yada." And she's kind of venting about this, and I say, "Well, did you tell her?" "Well, no, I didn't. No, I didn't tell her. I mean, that'd be awkward, And she starts venting some more, and I go, "Well, so are you going to tell her that?" "Well, no, I'm not going to." And it finally got to the point where she was laughing, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe I am not a candid person, or I'm not good at conflict and having these confrontational conversations." And I was laughing because I think at one point I even said, "You're looking for every other option than just going straight to this person and telling them what you think." And really, when I work with I've worked with this company for a long time, when they talk about how positive their culture is, one of the things they mention is that ability to now be confrontational and be direct and be assertive on, "Hey, this is what I think." See, in your business, every time you delay having that conversation, you are keeping your business from having the impact it can have. And what would be wild is if you can build a culture where this actually happens, it prevents you as the boss from having to do it yourself. Now, if you're in a company and you're not the boss, but you want to have these kinds of conversations, but you found yourself frustrated because people have not been receptive, chances are it's one of two things. It's either your delivery, so you're abrasive, and it's like the person who thinks that they're just being honest, but it's like, no, you're a jerk. It's like, hey, I'm just being honest. No, you're a jerk, really. But also, on the other hand, you have to have a company culture that your boss has stewarded this kind of environment where that is appreciated. And so it could be that you're in an environment where the boss just isn't promoting, hey, we tell people what we think here. We hold people accountable here, right? In fact, I was having lunch with somebody today, and he runs a window cleaning business. And he was talking about some people who've been underperforming in the past. And he was talking about his onboarding process for new employees. And he was talking about how he has this really good feeling about this new employee because it's this employee's first week on the job, and he, the boss, has been working alongside him and pointing out, hey, you're doing this wrong. Hey, you're missing it here. And he was like, I feel like I'm being kind of hard on him, but he seems really receptive to it. And I'm like, I'm listening, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's a genius. This is totally clicked for him. He's totally right. It does feel like you're being hard on someone, but ironically, you want to hire people who are hungry for growth anyway. And if they can't be receptive to honest growth, they probably aren't very good hires, right? And so you want to hire people who can take criticism, they can take feedback, and it's like drinking up a fire hose. I mean, they drink it up, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, I want to, because here's what I've found is that most people actually they want to know how they're missing the mark. They want to know how they missed it, how they blew it. It's the people who, you read, especially when you do like peer surveys. Like if you're doing like your annual review, sometimes companies will have like your peers write about you, or even like in a 360. How many times have you read a comment from something like that and thought, man, I wish they would have just told me, I wish they would have just told me instead of just like writing it here awkwardly. So it kind of all falls back on this whole concept of hire slow, but fire fast, which I've noticed people often agree with that statement, but I've found very few people actually execute with that kind of mentality. Most people hire entirely too fast. Can you do the job? Yep. Okay, great. You're on board. Or they don't even know what questions to ask. And then they fire way too slow. It's like I was talking to someone today who said, yeah, I have these two employees who are really underperforming, and I've kind of just known that they're underperforming. And I said, well, how long are you going to let them be underperforming? And he was like, yeah, I don't know. Because that's a lot what we do as business owners is we say, well, I want to be empathetic and I want to be understanding and I want to give them time. But frankly, a lot of people, they show their hand when they, right when you get to know them, they show their hand. And if they're not working with you from the get-go, chances are they're not going to be a great fit in the long term. So be direct with your people. Don't wait on a year or a 6 month. In fact, the window cleaning guy I was mentioning, he said he used to do 30-day and 90-day evaluations of his employees. And all of this stuff, it's like there's an HR book somewhere out there that says to do these things. And I'm not like They're fine when your company is a massive corporation and you need these mechanisms in place to make sure that these things happen. But like for a small business, what was so funny was as we were talking, he goes, really the 90-day review is pointless. And you know what? I think even the 30-day review is pointless. Because I think it was clicking for him that, if I am direct with them from the get-go, it's you work out so many of the kinks right off the bat. And so that clicked for him, and I thought, man, that's such a great concept. I want to make sure I share that with my listeners today. But wherever you are in your business, and again, whether you're an entrepreneur, you've been running a business for a while, be direct with people. And as you're listening, you're probably thinking like, yes, okay, I can do that. But then I want to challenge you to actually go forward and actually do that. And a saying that I always appreciated when I was younger, it might help you today. It goes, correction is not rejection. And I think that's valuable advice when you're giving feedback to someone and when you're also receiving it. When someone gives you feedback, like I think the person who probably wounds me the most when I get feedback is my wife, Joy, when she says, hey, you're not cutting it as a husband. Hey, it's not really working here. That's tough feedback, but I have to remember, okay, she's letting me know how to love her better or how to be a better husband. So correction is not rejection of me. And the same thing for you, as you're giving someone feedback, you're helping that person grow. You're not rejecting them, but probably a greater disservice you can do to someone would be to never tell them. And I want to close with this quick story. There was a man who was a CEO of a company, and he was talking about his philosophy of management. And he was saying one of the biggest frustrations he ever saw, there was an employee who got to be a senior level role. And whenever the CEO took over the CEO position, it's when he first started to engage with this guy who was like a senior vice president. And this guy was totally out of control. I mean, not a good employee, had a real anger problem, really emotionally immature, etc. And the CEO starts to mentor this guy, and he's real stubborn and real tough to actually manage. And long story short, this employee actually ends up getting let go. And so the employee's boss comes in and talks to the CEO and says, man, I really must have blown it by not developing this person like I should have. And the CEO says, yeah, you did, but who really blew it? The first manager that person ever had, who saw that problem and that immaturity in them and said nothing. Chances are when you run into someone you work with and they have these flaws or these things that are really they're debilitating to their professional career, you owe it to them to tell them. Because if you don't, as they move on to greater influence, that problem, it's only going to grow. And frankly, it could lead to the end of their career in whatever industry that they're in. Just like you would want someone to tell your people when they're missing the mark.